I'll go ahead and introduce our speaker, and then he'll have a presentation. There's some material up here and that type of thing. I had him send me just a short bio, so I'll go ahead and read this. Thomas Grash is an associate national bank examiner with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. He received his undergraduate degree in marketing at the University of Louisville. We won't hold that against him. His MBA through our online MBA program, which you'll find out as he talks to you, his type of position, the online MBA is a huge help when we travel a lot. So he finished that last year. And before deciding to go to work for the OCC, he worked at a general hospital. That was probably helpful. Large retail bank, leading insurance and investment company, and as he travels to work, he spends a lot of his free time with his wife, his daughter, and his dog Rex. Okay, and I want to remind you, this is a pretty big deal because it's hard to get the Comptroller of the Currency on campus at Murray State. Okay, I've been trying to do this for a long time, and typically because of budget concerns and because of other reasons, they normally hit the bigger universities in the state, and that's it, because they just have a limited amount of recruiting time that they can use. So this is something that I've been trying to do for a long time. There's some material up here after he makes his presentation. If you want to ask questions or whatever, there may be some people coming in after 45 classes, or if you have 4 or 5 classes, you may want to, if you can't leave, understand that, but be sure to grab some material before you leave. I'll turn it over to Thomas and get his presentation up here. Ready? Go.
All right. Thank you so much, and thanks for letting me come out here. I hope this is the first of many. I'll go ahead and get started with our presentation. So I'm from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. And typically, we go to a lot of schools, don't have as many banking experience professionals or banking classes as this one. So a lot of times people haven't even heard of the OCC. So our basic mission is to ensure all national banks are operating in a safe and sound manner, and that they're treating their customers fairly and kind of abiding by all the laws and regulations that go along with banking. So we were created by the National Banking Act of 1863. We're part of the Treasury Department, and we are a non-appropriated agency. So as opposed to taking tax revenues, the banks actually have to pay an assessment fee, and so we're completely funded by that, which gives us some advantages. We have approximately 4,000 employees. The graph here is all the different regulators, and this is by total asset size. So if you see the OCC is the blue, we're probably the least known of all these others. You know, the Fed and the FDIC, everybody hears of, but we actually regulate the largest chunk of assets in the banking sector. This is kind of a picture of all the different offices. Now, I'm from the Louisville field office, but when I start talking about our hiring window and our application process, there's actually going to be hirings all over the country. I know St. Louis, Indianapolis, just here regionally, but literally all over the U.S. will have openings. So we split up all of the banks into kind of 3 different sizes. Community banks, which are assets less than $8 billion. Most of those are way less than $8 billion. I work in what's called MCBS, mid-size and community banking. We've got 27 banks in our portfolio. All of them are $1 billion or less. We also have some mid-sized banks. Those are $8 to $30 billion. And then, of course, we've got a lot of the large, huge mega banks as well. We call them larger than $30 billion. So another question we get often is what do bank examiners do? A lot of people think that we're auditors, and in some sense we do some of that type of work. But essentially we go into a bank and we evaluate a number of different areas. Essentially we give them a grade report, a scorecard. So some of the areas we look at are capital, asset quality. That's going to be, what are the quality of the loans and investments that the bank has. We evaluate their management, their board, their earnings, liquidity, sensitivity to market risk, how well are they positioned, to fluctuations and changes in market rates. And then the other areas are consumer compliance, information technology, which has gotten to be a very, very big hot topic in our industry, and asset management if they have trust powers. So how does a bank exam work? Well, the banks are on what's called a fiducious cycle, and it's either 12 to 18-month exam cycles depending on their size. The larger banks, we go in every 12 months. The smaller banks will go into every 18 months. There'll be an examiner in charge, and so they're in charge of all the different examiners. You'll go in there. It's a lot of teamwork. We do most of our work on site at the banks. We'll go in and we'll analyze and we'll question. We'll talk to bank management. We'll look at reports, talk with each other, and kind of come up with some conclusions on those different areas that we just talked about. Then we'll write those conclusions up in a report of exam, and finally we'll present those to the board of directors. So we're hiring for what's called an assistant national bank examiner, and these are kind of the key responsibilities for the role that we're hiring for. It's to assist and conduct these bank exams that we were talking about, work with the team to gather, organize, and analyze the data, assess compliance with banking laws and regulations. There's a lot of writing, preparing written conclusions, recommendations, other reports, memos. There's all kinds of different writing that we have to do to explain our findings either to other OCC examiners or to senior management at the board of the banks. And then we participate in a lot of on-the-job and traditional classroom training. So the Assistant National Bank Examiner kind of has a set career progression until you get to a certain point. So you come on as the entry level, you'll immediately go into a training team that's 6 to 8 months of mostly on the job with some classroom training. You'll actually go into the banks with the rest of the examiners and perform the work just like they will. You'll be in a protected training environment with a training team leader and a training team assistant to help you out, but you'll actually be doing the work, talking to the bankers, making conclusions, everything like you would. After you've been on a year, then you'll be an associate national bank examiner. We'll give you a 10% raise, and you'll start working your way towards this, what we call the UCE, the Uniform Commission Exam. When you become commissioned, you become a bank examiner, a national bank examiner, and from then on you'll be able to lead teams or do a number of other things throughout our agency. And so that's going to take a number of years of acquiring different types of assignments, taking different types of trainings. Because we evaluate all of those different areas, you're going to need multiple assignments in each area. We're a generalized career progression. So you're not just going to focus on one area, you're going to learn all the areas. Once you become commissioned, there's a number of different avenues you can go to. A lot of times people find a specific area that they really enjoy or that they really think they understand more than others, and so they'll specialize in that area. A lot of our examiners will go on to mid-size and large banks. In large banks, let's say the Chase, for example, instead of going around to a bunch of different large banks, we have teams of examiners that just examine Chase all year long. Their office is in Chase's office. So a lot of people go to large banks or specialty. And then there's all kinds of other areas, policy, licensing, tons of stuff in the headquarters in D.C. once you pass that commission exam. I want to talk about travel because it is a significant portion of our job, so we try to get out up front. Some people love to travel. Some people, find it to be difficult with the amount of travel that we have. This is my office. The Louisville location is 60 to 85%. That's probably come down a little bit. We are focusing in the OCC to try to minimize the difficulty that the banks have with us completing these examinations. With the technology and the security that we have, there's more and more things that we can do off-site that we don't have to be sitting there in their basement somewhere to actually examine. So that number's come down slightly, but it's still a very significant part of our time. Much of the travel will be by cars. Our furthest bank from our office is actually here, so this is the furthest drive I've got. Everything else is within the 1 to 2 hour range typically. Anything that's close enough, you're welcome to commute back and forth from your home. Since we do so much travel, we have very flexible schedules. In my office, most of us work 4 10-hour days. So we'll work Monday through Thursday, and we'll have every Friday off. That makes for nice 3-day weekends. When we got 10 federal holidays, and so that makes for some nice 4-day weekends. Compensation and benefits. So our starting salary for this position is $50,000. We feel like that's a pretty competitive starting salary. There's not really any negotiation with that. But they also have merit increases and bonuses. And I mentioned one, after your year, you get a 10% raise. We also have things called specialty increases where you get a 5% raise. Every year you'll have an evaluation, and you'll have a raise depending on your work product. Once you pass that UCE exam that we talked about, if you pass on the first time, you get a $5,000 bonus plus another $10,000 raise. So they're very frugal with their increases. I mentioned the flexible work schedules. I can't tell you, coming from retail banking where I had to work on the weekends and holidays. I worked in a bank that was in a grocery store, so we were open 7 days a week till late at night. We were open on some of the non-major federal holidays, and working only 4 days a week I don't think I can go back now. We've got low-cost life, health, and accident insurance. I mentioned earlier that we weren't appropriated by tax dollars, so we kind of get to do some of our own stuff. One of the things is we have access to all of the federal benefits, which are great. I mean, they're some of the best out there. But we also have these extra benefits on top of ours, since we kind of control our own funds. So we can get the federal dental and vision plan, but we have our own OCC plan that's completely paid for, nothing out of pocket to us. The federal insurance, health insurance plan, the OCC gives you a stipend every pay period to help go towards your part of your premiums. We also have not only the federal retirement plans, but our own OCC 401k with very lucrative matching program. They put $1,000 in there every year, even if you don't put anything in there. And then also an annual life cycle fund to assist with quality of life expenses. That's an extra, right now it's $1,000, it's going to go up to $1,250 that you can either take out as cash for extra money, or you could take tax-free to pay for health expenses or dependent care expenses. So who are we looking for with this position? We're looking for candidates with a 4-year course of study leading to a bachelor's degree in any related business field. I came out with a degree in marketing. So as long as you've taken your basic accounting and finances and you're going to be graduating, that's who we're looking for. We need people with strong oral and written communication skills, strong analytical skills, the ability to work well in a team environment, of course, willingness to travel. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to apply. Our window does not open until September 12th, next week. So I will be sure, we're going to post it on the website. I'm sure Dr. Lacewell will spread the word as well. But you'll go to this link here. You'll enter in your information. You'll submit an application. You have to submit an unofficial transcript, a couple other bits of information. And then, as long as you meet the minimum qualifications, you'll be invited to go to a testing center to take 2 tests. One will be a knowledge-based test, multiple choice questions, basic finance and accounting, nothing crazy, nothing banking specific, and then a writing test. They'll give you a bunch of different reports and information, and kind of your job is just to take what you think the relevant information is and organize it neatly into a nice little report. Once you pass that, then we'll do phone interviews. Someone from our local office or whatever office you apply to typically will phone you in for an interview. If you get past that screen, then we'll invite you up to our district office, which is in Chicago. So we'll fly you out, put you in a nice hotel room, give you some per diem to eat in Chicago, and you'll come there for part of your background check, take some fingerprints, and then also do a panel interview, typically with a couple of what we call ADCs, but essentially like an office, the manager of the field offices. These are going to be our new application dates. I do want to mention I don't have a slide in here, but they're doing something new this year where not only are all of our offices within mid-sized and community banks hiring, but for the first time they're hiring large bank training teams. And so this would be a chance to go, you'd have to go to one of the large bank cities. We're hiring in New York, Pittsburgh, there's some others that you'll see them on the website, maybe Charlotte. And we're actually going to hire examiners straight into the large bank environment. You'll go through a year-long training team just dealing with that bank that you'll be on after your 1 year as well. So interesting opportunities there. So that's a little bit about our position and what we're looking for. Does anybody have any questions? Or if you'd like, there's also some material. Feel free to go ahead and come on down while we're asking questions. Well, that's a good question. So most of the numbers I have are aggregate since we have all of the offices open up the window at the same time. I think for our office we had 24 applicants last fall at this time, which was a record for us. We only had 16 of those that made it to the test. So people apply and they never show up, or they didn't send in their unofficial transcript, something like that. And I think from there we had somewhere around 6 or 7 that passed both of the exams and the phone exam, and we ended up hiring 2 of those. From application, that's probably about right, but most of that is falling off from either they don't show up, they weren't really that interested, or they didn't pass 1 to 2 exams. Once you pass that rate, then they're pretty locked in. They try not to invite too many people to what we call a career exploration day because it's expensive. You know, you got to fly someone out there, so they wouldn't be seriously considering someone if they would only be seriously considering some people if they offer you the career exploration day. I don't find the exams to be that difficult. The finance and the accounting one, we used to have, I'm glad we got rid of it. We used to have this little bullet point about what's going to be on the exam. It was all this finance stuff and like 2 little accounting bullets. And then I got to the exam and it was all this accounting stuff that I hadn't taken in a number of years. And so I passed and I hadn't touched accounting in a long time. So as long as you got the basics and fundamentals, that's not that bad. The writing test is actually typically where most of the people get tripped up. It's got about a 50% pass-fail rate, and I'm not really sure why. They're really just looking for organization, basic sentence structure, but that tends to be where we get most of the people that drop off, not necessarily the finance and accounting exam. Yes? Okay. Well, it's going to ask you, essentially it's going to ask you a bunch of questions that you're going to kind of have to lie on in order for it to even accept you to take the test. So I don't think that's going to work out. But what I will say, I failed to mention this, but this position is going to be hiring June of 17. So anyone that's graduating this December or next May is what we're targeting. But we've been hiring in my office every year for the past maybe 6 or 7 years. The OCC went through a big period where things were really good and they weren't really hiring, and now we're left with, we've got a bunch of people that we've hired here in the past 5 or 6 years, and we've got a bunch of people reaching retirement and still retiring and popping off. So we may not be hiring as many people as we have in the past few years, but I would expect that next year we'll be hiring around the same time period. So, and hopefully I'll be able to come back out here and present again. They don't give me the specific number because it'll depend on how many applications we have, but I do know it's multiple positions, so I'm confident we've got at least 2 coming. Yes?
If somebody applies, are they applying just to your office, or are they applying to, can they apply anywhere nationwide?
Good question. So in the application, when you click on the link, it's actually an application for any office. So you'll be able to pick your priority. I want to go to the Louisville office, or maybe you want to go to one of the other offices, or maybe you want to go to one of the large bank things. That'll all be in those options of the application, and then you'll also have a spot for a second choice. So if that gets filled up, but you'd be willing to go to Indianapolis or some other place, you can put in a second choice as well. Right. No, there's not. So everything's very cut and dry and only done by the application minimum requirements. So anybody that's above and beyond the minimum requirements, none of that really can show up until you get into an interview situation. So everybody that qualifies gets an opportunity to test. Everybody that passed the test gets an opportunity to do a phone interview. From that point forward, other experience could come into play. Yes, graduate students can apply also. I applied when I was a graduate student and already been working for a number of years, so absolutely.
One thing too to keep in mind, Thomas, you might touch on this, but if you go to the OCC website, they have a huge section on career, and it talks about, and it has a lot of the more senior positions listed, so you can get a feel for kind of the pay scale that they pay really well. And also if you look at the map of where they're located, depending on how much you want to travel, there are certain locations where there's less travel, there's more banks locally, there are certain locations where there's a lot of travel. So for example, if you look at the Northwest, they are really, really spaced all the way apart. So if you're working in the, is there one in Billings?
Yeah.
If you're working in the Billings field office, you're going to travel a lot. I mean, look where you look at go out. But if you're located, for example, in New York or Pittsburgh or maybe Dallas or some of those where there may be several banks within an hour radius, you may not have to stay out there. So that might play a role for some of them in terms of travel.
Yeah. And another thing I want to point out is while some of these areas, the travels can be extensive, they do reward you pretty handsomely for travel. We pay, if you're driving in your car, we pay a very competitive rate in mileage. We get a daily per diem allowance. If you're in an area, if I'm doing training in Chicago, I get a much higher per diem since the cost of living there is so much more expensive. And so, a lot of the examiners make a lot of extra income on the travel benefits. If you stay out too many nights in a year, they'll start giving you a bonus for every night over. If you, I try to book any Hampton, Hilton type of property that'll accept the government rate. I try to book because we're allowed to keep our hotel points. And so I've gotten to rack up a number of hotel points, stay at some other places for free. I'm getting married next year, so we're going on our honeymoon for free with our hotel points, so I can thank the OCC for that one. So there's some perks to the travel besides just, having to be out all the time. Yeah.
Do you still have a geographic pay differential? So for example, if you work in San Francisco, you pay.
Yes, we do have a geographic pay differential. The bigger cities, that's going to be high. San Francisco, New York, it's sky high. They just bumped a bunch of them up again. We just got a 1% pay differential for all of the areas that don't have one. But so depending on, and that'll be on the website as well. You can see, some of them go up as high as 38 or 40% now. It's of course the cost of living there is pretty high too. So. They try to keep in pace with where they're at. Any other questions? All right, well, I've got some materials down here. It'll have the website that the posting will be on, and again, also on the 12th, I'll send that out. I've also got my business card, so if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to email me. I'll be glad to answer anything you got. Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you.